This is Andrew Barber-Starkey, welcoming you to the Mastermind series, where every month we learn from the wisdom of leading authors, trainers, and innovators. Recently, I was given a program called Access Your Abundance, which includes a workbook combined with a series of tapes. As soon as I began looking at the material, I knew right away this was something I wanted to share with Success Tracks members. I contacted the author, and she agreed to give us an interview. Teresa Romain is the president and founder of Access Abundance Services International. Her organization was founded for the sole purpose of helping people create greater levels of abundance, freedom, and fulfillment in their daily lives. In 1994, Teresa left a successful corporate career to begin a new direction in her own search for fulfillment, balance, freedom, and prosperity. After nearly 2 years of intensive study, personal development, and a certification as a coach in life planning, she founded Access Abundance. Her work is based on one simple principle. The abundance we are looking for is already available to each of us. Our job is not to create it, but rather to access it. And in order to access it, we must remove the blocks, patterns, thoughts, the messages and fears, and what Harf would call mind frick that comes between us and the abundance we seek. Through the programs and services she has created, Teresa makes accessing your abundance fun, exhilarating, and most of all, practical. Welcome, Teresa Romain.
Thank you, Andrew. It's good to be here.
Well, the material that I saw in the workbook and on the tapes was so fabulous. I think what I like best about it is the way it's elegantly simple. I mean, I think the truth is always simple, and you just seem to have presented it in a way that is so smooth and easy. So I'm just really excited to be able to have the opportunity to interview you.
Thanks.
And if it would be okay with you, maybe we could just start with you sharing a little bit of your story about how you got from corporate America to being a writer, a trainer, and a coach on abundance.
Sure. Actually, ironically enough, I think I got to be doing or being a coach on abundance through the paths of scarcity, because when I left the corporate world, or even for that matter while I was in the corporate world, unbeknownst to me, I had a lot of scarcity patterns. Scarcity patterns are the names I give to what prevents us from accessing abundance. And, when I was in the corporate world, I made some great money. A few years out of college, I had the six-figure income. And since I had never had a lot of money in my life prior to that, I found out I really liked it. And at the same time, I really didn't know what to do with it, at least how to use it abundantly. I didn't necessarily waste it on what people might call frivolous things, but no matter how much I made, it seemed like there was never a lot left at the end of the month, and that was always a mystery to me. And after I had been in the corporate world for 6, 7, 8, 9 years, I started to get that wasn't what I wanted to be doing with my life anymore. And so I started to look for something that would be it'd make a bigger contribution to people in their lives, that it would be more meaningful for me. And when I started to look for those things, I was faced with an interesting dilemma. The things that I thought I'd love to do that would be meaningful for me and make a difference in people's lives, I couldn't make a six-figure income at. And so I was in this choice of either I get to keep the money and do something that I don't enjoy anymore, or go do something that I'd enjoy and it looked like I wouldn't get to have the money. And, I didn't like that choice. I don't like a lot of either-or thinking. And about that time, I met the man who became my husband, and long story short, was introduced to the concept of network marketing. And I thought network marketing was brilliant. It opened the doors to me to see out of the rat race of working for a job and having to work for someone to make money. I saw how I could make a difference in people's lives and still make a lot of money. And so, not maybe the best decision from a financial perspective, my husband and I decided to leave the Chicago area where we lived. We moved to Minnesota and bought a house, or assumed a mortgage more truthfully, and I quit. And so we decided that we were going to do our network marketing business full time, because we figured that as talented as we were, by the time we had spent down our reserves, we'd be making more than enough money, lots of money, have a nice residual income, and we'd be set for life. Well, have you heard that phrase, the best laid plans, Andrew?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it didn't quite work that way. Because once I left the corporate world, I was having so much fun having the free time and not having to work and things like that. And, You know, when you move into a house, you want to spend time fixing up the house, and so we did a lot of that. At the same time, I was really enjoying some intense personal development work that I was doing, and we were spending a lot of money, you know, on that, and that was worth every penny of it. And we were building our network marketing business, but it wasn't going as fast as we wanted, and it seemed more difficult than we had expected. It was like we would go at it strong for a while and get some good results, and then we'd kind of drop the ball. We'd start then stop and start then stop, and I couldn't figure out why it wasn't working, because both my husband and I are great at meeting people. You know, we're good leaders, we're good teachers and trainers, and something wasn't happening that our income hadn't taken off yet. And so after doing lots of personal development, spending money on that, taking a hiatus, and of course, because we were going to be leaders in our network marketing business, we were traveling to all of the training seminars and things like that. Well, let's put it this way. We were spending more money than we were making, and pretty soon if you keep doing that, you kind of go backwards. And so suddenly we were going into debt very quickly. And when we did that, my husband and I, we kind of had two ways of doing it. We were polar opposites. His response to the debt was, we have to cut back, we have to cut back, we have to cut back. And that felt like deprivation, and I don't do deprivation very well. And so I said, no, we have to make more, we have to make more. And so I'd try harder, and we were trying to work our business harder and harder, which anybody who knows in network marketing, the harder you try and do it, it seems the less results you have. And so I really didn't want to deal with the debt because it looked painful. It looked like we were going to have to suffer and struggle and not go out to eat and not have vacations for, forever until we had atoned for our errors. And Dan was over there going, we have to cut back. And I really got that something had to change here. I started to look at my relationship with money over my life. And whether I had a lot of it or whether I had a little of it, it seemed like there was always this scarcity around money. And so finally I said, I've got to find another way of dealing with this. I have to find another way of, one, dealing with the debt, and for that matter, our whole relationship with money, the making of it, the keeping of it, the spending it. And, once you open yourself up to finding other ways, which I've always liked to do, you start to find them. And about that time in my life, that was about 5-6 years ago, I started to study abundance, some principles for getting out of debt and, prosperity and stuff like that. It was like a whole new world opened up to me. And it was so powerful and so revolutionary to me. It was just a whole new paradigm that I was absolutely incredibly ecstatic. And so I started telling all my friends, especially my friends in network marketing, and they were as blown away and affected by it as I was. And so long story short, as I began telling more people about it, I found out that that's really what I love to do. I started to see that, one of the gifts I have is once my eyes were open to this idea of scarcity, I could start to see the scarcity patterns or the blocks and the thoughts I had that had kept me, even though I had all the talent and I could do everything right, that kept me from having the abundance I wanted in my life, monetarily and in other ways. And that's when Access Abundance was formed. And I've been doing it ever since.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Well, maybe we should start with this definition of scarcity and abundance, because obviously you can have a lot and still be in scarcity. So could you just define give us your definition of scarcity and abundance?
Sure, and I think mine changes the further I go in my own journey. The definition I have right now that I'm working with for scarcity is a reaction to a perception, usually a perception we have, occasionally it will be actual, to some type of limitation or lack or loss that we don't want. So it's a reaction we have to a perceived limitation or a loss or a lack that we don't want in our lives. That's how I respond to it. So scarcity can come in many forms. It can come in the form of worry and anxiety. Scarcity can show up as fear. For me, for the longest time, scarcity, especially back in those days of network marketing when we were going further into debt, scarcity showed up as working harder, pushing, the infamous try harder and one day you'll get there, except for it doesn't work. Mm-hmm. Scarcity can show up in not being able to enjoy life, not being able to have fun. So many people, they've grown up with the message you can't go out and play till your work is done. So we've got a lot of adults out there never getting their work done, so never being able to play and truly let themselves, play and recreate, except for their 2 weeks a year vacation and things like that. Scarcity can show up in, hoarding or contracting or hanging on to things too tightly. Those are all types of scarcity reactions. Another great one is overwhelm and procrastination. I mean, I can't think of a human being alive, let alone entrepreneurs or network marketers, who don't know overwhelm and procrastination. And, another great one, when I looked back, at the time I was in network marketing, now I see all of these scarcity patterns that were getting in the way, and I didn't know how to get around them. They were the only way I knew for going through life. That stop, start, stop, that pattern, that's scarcity as well. So for me, that perception of scarcity or limitation comes from, at its root, some thought of there's not enough. Mm-hmm. And when people have the thought that there's not enough, or they're not doing enough, or they're not good enough, or, I don't have enough, that creates a reaction, and our behaviors and the actions we take from that point on are influenced by that reaction and by that thought. And so that's where the scarcity comes in.
And one of the points you made in the tapes that really struck me is that we live in probably the most abundant society that ever existed,
right,
where very few of us ever have to really worry about going without necessities, and yet so many of us live in that scarcity.
Yeah, we are walking around. We are wired for scarcity in our society. In fact, we're so wired for it, we don't even recognize it as scarcity. When I work with people, that's some of the biggest ahas, is that things that they just held as being, that's the way life is, that's just what you need to do, that's just what you should expect, to find out that that's scarcity and it doesn't have to be that way is one of the biggest ahas for people that I know. It's like a whole new world opens to them.
At the risk of putting on the spot, can you think of an example of that?
Yeah, I can think of one. It has to do with money. In one of my courses, I teach people what I learned about getting out of debt and systems for getting out of debt in a quick, simple way. And when I first began teaching that to people, I used to just kind of quizzically ask people I'd met or people who were wondering what I do. I'd say, well, do you have any debt? And I'm not kidding you, Andrew. I would say, this is informally done, but I would say that 90% of the people I talk to would have said that their mortgage is in debt. Like they'd say, oh, no, I pay off my credit cards every month. And I'd go, well, what about a mortgage? And they'd literally say, that's not debt. And it's like one of the, this is just the way it is. You buy a house, you assume a mortgage. Yes, you should pay off, pay an extra payment a year, but who has that much money? And so just this, you do a mortgage, you have it for 30 years, that's a payment, it's just the way life is. When people suddenly start to take a look at, well, how come I have a mortgage? And how does that set up more scarcity in my life? How does that keep me in the rat race of having to work harder and harder and harder? Light bulbs go on. But you see, what happens oftentimes is when we get in our scarcity way of thinking, it's like we get so in it, you can't see the forest for the trees. And most of us don't take time to see, now hold it. Why am I taking this action? Is this action supporting me where I want to go, or am I just doing it because, well, that's what somebody told me to do? In many respects, Andrew, I say that the danger of scarcity patterns is that they rob us of our power. They rob us of our energy. And so the first step for people when I work with them in the process of abundance is they just need to start to become aware of them. Because if you're not aware of the way they're robbing you of choice and freedom and power and energy, you can't do anything about it. And one of the things that I know happened for me, and it happens for so many people, is most of us have not consciously gone through a process of creating a relationship with money, a way of thinking and relating to money that serves us. Most of us have created a relationship with money that's an amalgam of all the different things we've heard from different people, and we've just kind of absorbed it by osmosis and held it to be true. And things like mortgages, debts, and a lot of the things that we do with money, really, while we think that's what you're supposed to do to be abundant, oftentimes they just keep us in scarcity even more.
So it's really about stepping back and taking a look at the forest from the trees.
Yeah, it's about seeing, what you've never seen before, being willing to see what you didn't know you needed to see. John Milton Fogg, in his book, it's a book that many network marketers would know, called The Greatest Network in the World. He talks about the principle of discovering what you don't know you don't even know. And that's what I think it is oftentimes, is the scarcity patterns are blind to us unless you're willing to start to question and look. Like me in my own journey, when finally I said, hold it. The current status isn't working. There's got to be another way. But a lot of people don't even let themselves believe there can be another way. That's another scarcity pattern, that we've been conditioned for. Don't get your hope up. You should just accept it. You should be grateful for what you've got. We've got all of these thoughts that we've heard, or messages that we've heard, that prevent us from believing, there could be another way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So if scarcity is all about feeling that there's not enough, talk to us about abundance.
Abundance for me is it's a way of being, or it's a quality of life that you have when there's a feeling and an experience of being filled. A lot of people, I used to use the definition more than enough for abundance. In fact, that's what you'll find in Webster's dictionary. It will define abundance as great plenty and more than enough. And the root word of abundance is to abound. So I think of that as abounding. To have an abundant life is to have a life that abounds and is filled with the things that you value most. Money, because that's an important part in our world. Freedom, love, fun, fulfillment, balance, health. All of those come together for abundance, and all of them affect every component of abundance. Like I said, I used to think of it as being more than enough until recently, when I kind of did a little demonstration, or did a little experiment. And if you could imagine with me, Andrew, that you were holding a teacup right now over your kitchen sink, and that teacup was literally filled to the brim with water. Mm-hmm. And then in your other hand, you've got a pitcher of water. And you said, I'm going to I want more than enough. More than enough. That's what abundance is. I'm going to put more than enough in this cup. If you actually poured from that pitcher of water into the cup, you'd displace the water that was in the cup. It would overflow. And when you're done, you'd actually see that there's a little drop. There's actually a little less in the cup than when you began. Mm-hmm. And so I no longer think of abundance as being more than enough, like you need to have extra, because that's a scarcity thought too, like I need a little bit more. But abundance is really a state, a way of living in life that you remain fulfilled with the things that you value the most. I remember something that Harv once taught that triggered some thoughts in me. There's a quote that I love. It's from a woman named Mary Webb. And she says, the well of providence is deep. It's the buckets we bring to it that are small. Mm-hmm. And I think that so many of us, we think that the way to become more abundant is to put more into our bucket, to try and get more than enough.
Right.
Except for in our attempts to do that, to try and put more into our lives, we usually create more scarcity. We become less. We're trying to do more. We're trying to make more. And when we do that, in trying to get more in our bucket, we wind up having less time, less freedom, like that type of stuff. Because we don't understand that the process of accessing abundance is one not of, trying to fit more in the little cup, but it's to expand the size of your bucket.
Mm-hmm, because I remember you saying in the book that the attitude that most of us bring is that I'm going to have to do X in order to have Y, yes, in order to be abundant.
Yes, exactly.
And maybe you could take that over and continue it.
Sure. One of the greatest scarcity patterns that we are conditioned to in our society, and it is one that I was blind to for however many years of my life, and I've really only started to appreciate more in recent years, is there's this formula for being successful or productive that says we have to do something. You have to go to school, you have to get a good job, you have to make money, you have to save money. We are oriented in our society for doing, for action. So we have to do something in order to have something. Way back when we were kids, you have to go to school so you can have a good job. But on top of that, they didn't even say to have a good job, they said to get a good job, which is more doing. You know, and if you had a good job, then you'd be able to make money and you'd have security and you'd be happy and all of that sort of stuff. Well, we all know that that's not necessarily true. But the emphasis is on doing. And if you have to do something in order to have something, more money, a nice home, more free time, you name it, in order to be abundant, notice that the being abundant is down the road after you've done all this and you have all of this.
Oh, how interesting, yes.
And if being abundant is down the road, what does that make you right now? It doesn't make you abundant right now. It has you in scarcity.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're starting in a place of scarcity, guess what? It's going to follow you all the way along. How many of us have spent years trying to do the do, have, be, and we still haven't gotten to the place of abundance? And it's not necessarily because we're not making more money. We may be making more money. We may have better jobs. We may have all that sort of stuff. But we're still, where's that elusive abundance?
Would you say it's true then that there's even people out there who are multimillionaires who are not abundant?
Yes. They have lots of money and they may be wealthy, but they may not be abundant.
Because they're doing and having and focusing on, I've always got to do more, there's never enough.
Right. Again, you have to go back to where they're starting from. Is it a motivation from, it's not enough, I have to do more until one day? Or the way I teach people is it's just the opposite. You have to learn to be abundant first. Out of your being abundant, in your thoughts, in your beliefs, in your energy, in your actions, all that sort of stuff, the universe will create wonderful opportunities for you, possibilities for you, partnerships, prospects, you name it. Plus, you'll have, motivation, discipline, desire, commitment, all of the things that you need. And in response to having those things, both the opportunities, the ideas, the possibilities, and the motivation, etc., the doing part, the taking the actions, is a very natural thing to do. It's then about you take actions that are congruent with who you're being. Whereas for most of us, we're trying to do these things so that we can be that way. And that creates the overwhelm and the fear and the avoidance and the struggle that most of us think, well, that's just the way it is.
Well,
and it doesn't have to be that way.
Teresa, I absolutely agree with you intellectually. I mean, a person whose pattern is that I have to do in order to have before I can be, the chances of them working on that for years and years and years until they've done a lot and have a lot, and then making a 180-degree shift are pretty small.
Yeah.
However, at the same time, how can a person who feels like they don't have enough, too much month left at the end of the money kind of thing, and they don't have it? I mean, I guess it seems almost like twisting my mind to say, well, actually, I do have enough when I don't.
Great.
And I don't want to be satisfied with little.
Yes, it's very interesting that you said, these are your exact words, well, how do I convince myself that I do have enough when I don't? One of the oldest and foundational principles of abundance that people need to be able to develop, and it really is a new habit of abundance that they need to develop, it's really the foundation of abundance, is based on one of the oldest success principles, which you know about, is that of focus. Mm-hmm. Whatever you focus on the most is what's going to show up. So if you focus on scarcity, Andrew, what's going to show up?
I get more scarcity.
Great. If you focus on abundance, what's going to show up?
I'll get more abundance.
Great. Now that right there, I mean, that's it. That's the formula. It's that simple, but that doesn't make it easy. So when people are focusing on, well, how do I tell myself that I'm abundant when I don't have enough? Notice that they're still focused on scarcity. How do I convince myself that I'm abundant when I have little? Notice they're focused on little. And there's no way, as long as they're continuing to see what they have through the eyes of scarcity, there's no way they'll be abundant. And so one of the first things that people need to start to develop so that they can shift into this be, have, do, is they need to truly develop the muscle of focusing on abundance. You mentioned it earlier. We're living in a world and a society that has unprecedented levels of wealth and abundance, but we're all walking around like we're in scarcity. And that's because we're not seeing abundance.
So because we're focusing on scarcity.
Yep. At the end of the day, you had 25 things on your to-do list before you began the day, Andrew. At the end of the day, there's 5 undone. What are you focusing on?
I'm looking at how far I fell short.
Yep. You're looking at the 5 you missed instead of the 20 that you did. That's a habit.
That's interesting because you've really hit unknowingly on one of the principles that we teach in the Success Tracks program, which is the importance of measuring your progress, not how far you fell short of what you intended to do.
Yeah, exactly. You've got to focus on the abundance that's around you and within you. I read this, I think it was in a Tony Robbins book, Awaken the Giant Within. He was talking about what his experience was when he was learning how to drive race cars. And evidently, this is foreign to me, but you can go to race car driver's school or something, and just like when you're learning to pass your road test, you'll have a driver's ed teacher, and you'll go out in this car, and your race car, and you'll go whip it around the track, you know, the oval track at 70, 80, 90, 100 miles an hour. And, you know, if you really get into that type of a thing, which I think you do, Andrew, you know, you're driving along, and you're feeling the adrenaline and the speed and all that, and you're going, wow, this is life. And what you don't know about in your first lesson is that some moment when you're least expecting it, your teacher has a button or something he can push in the car that's going to have it spin out of control intentionally. And so suddenly, you know, you were going along fine, and suddenly the car's doing donuts and the wall's coming at you super fast. What's your first thought, Andrew?
I'm going to look at the wall, I'm sure.
Yeah, it's like, oh, no, not the wall. Or my first thought would be, oh, my God, I'm going to die, you know? I'd close my eyes and not look. But if you look at the wall and go, oh, no, not the wall, you're going to hit it every time. And the reason why that becomes the first lesson that race car drivers have to have is because it is literally a life or death response they have to learn. That any time they lose control of the car, they literally, physically have to turn their head and their eyes back to the track in the direction they want to go. That's the only chance they have of having their hands on the wheel get the car turned around. If they look at the wall, if they look at what they're afraid of hitting, they'll hit it every time.
It strikes me that your reaction of closing your eyes is actually probably better than mine of looking at the wall.
That's true. You know, it's like, you know, let the car do its thing here. But you know, that's what happens. And yet, what we do as we go through life is we focus on the scarcity. We focus on the walls we're going to hit. We focus on the fears. We focus on what we don't have. And we're just going to have more of it because we haven't trained ourselves. We haven't taken seriously that we need to. First lesson is consciously learn to focus on abundance that's within you because it's there and that's around you. And one of the exercises I have people do in all of my courses is the keeping of an abundance journal. And I have a particular format. Mm-hmm. You know, on one half of the abundance journal, I encourage people to write every day 10 things that they're grateful for. And what that does is if every day you start to find 10 things in your life that you're grateful for, that automatically will have you seeing abundance. And that will automatically have you start to experience and be abundant more so than when you're going through life seeing, I don't have this, and I don't have this, and I don't have this. Nothing will have changed yet on the externals, but your relationship with them will have changed.
So appreciation of what you do have is the same as focusing on abundance.
Yep. Being grateful for it because now you're seeing it.
Okay.
When you're done with that, then write down 10 things beginning with the phrase, today I acknowledge myself for. And that's the one that people have the most difficulty with because we are brilliant at seeing what's wrong with us, what we haven't done. I'm not good enough at this. I didn't do this right. We are really good at focusing on the scarcity within ourselves.
Well, Teresa, I actually have been doing that exercise since I got hold of the material, and I don't have much trouble getting up to 3 things that I acknowledge myself for.
Great. So then let me invite you to get a breakthrough around that one. Because if you're having a difficult time, as successful as you are, not coming up with 10 every day in just 5 minutes flat, there's probably some scarcity going on.
Sure.
Many people, when they're acknowledging themselves, and this might be for you, if you're even thinking of something to acknowledge yourself for, you'll dismiss it. I'm going to check this with you. Have you ever had the thought, oh, that's not good enough?
Absolutely.
That's not big enough? That's not important enough? Well, I'm supposed to do that, so that doesn't count? See, those are all more of the, we're focusing on the scarcity. It's not enough. There's that perception of scarcity. It's not big enough. It's not good enough. And so we miss the greatness and the abundant qualities already within us. When I first began this, I was regularly acknowledging myself for brushing my teeth before I go to bed. I grant that's not earth-shattering. That's not going to make a difference in very many people's lives. My husband maybe, perhaps.
No, but I'm up to 4.
Okay, it's like, but, how many of us listening on this tape, and you too, Andrew, sometimes we don't want to, or washing my face before I go to bed, or for that matter, just getting out of bed in the morning. And when we can start to see those things, it's like suddenly there's a lot more in our lives that we're doing and that we're being than we're not. And when we can start to shift that, that's immediately going to change how we're interacting with life. And if we change how we're interacting with life, life will start to change how it interacts with us. Harv in his Millionaire Mind tapes says, if it's not in the roots, it's not going to be in the fruits. Right. You know what I mean? You've got to, if it's not inside, it's not going to be outside. You can't look for abundance to come as a result of the externals. It has to be. And you can take this idea of the abundance journal, and you can really consciously start to use it to shift out of that do, have, be, by starting to think about, well, what are qualities or characteristics that authentically abundant people have? And you know what? Some of the common ones, they're courageous, they're creative, they're disciplined or focused or dedicated. You can pick whichever word you'd like there. They're consistent. They're receptive. They're also generous. People start to pay attention to these qualities.
Flexible, yeah. They're
flexible. They're clear, that's part of. There's a clarity of where they're going in their intention. Some of those qualities. Now, if you start to focus on, as you get up in the morning, instead of saying, now, what do I need to do today, which keeps you in the do, have, be mode, instead of like, okay, how am I going to be courageous today? How am I going to be disciplined today? How am I going to be creative today? How am I going to be fun today, generous today? There's a very different energetic response people have when their focus is on being those things versus doing something. And people say, yeah, but how do I connect them? And you can use that abundance journal to really start to make these connections. If I brush my teeth before I go to bed, Andrew, when I didn't want to, what quality of abundance am I being?
You're being disciplined.
Yeah. And yet what happens is we've got a lot of people out there maybe listening to this tape who are going through saying, I'm not very disciplined. That's the thought they have about themselves. That's the message they keep telling themselves, I'm not very disciplined. And so what happens is I have to do something to get disciplined. And Richard Brooke in his book, Mach 2 with Your Hair on Fire, and some of the old success principles are, your vision is what, creates the action. So if you have a vision of yourself as not being very disciplined, the action's going to match that vision. If you can suddenly start to see yourself as being disciplined, even if it's in small ways there first, that's going to change your actions, and you're going to start to be disciplined in other areas too, because once you see yourself as being disciplined, the actions match. The doing is a very natural response. Another common one, people, and this shows the shift. It's like people say, oh, I'm not very good at managing my time. That's the vision they have of themselves. So what do? They go to another time management class. They get a new time management system and all that sort of stuff. See, that's the doing. It's like, no. It's like, how can, look and see, how am I good at managing my time? I've had so many parents say I'm not very good at managing my time, but yet they get 6 kids off to school and get dinner fed on time and stuff like that. And I'm going, if you're not, I don't know what is. But see, they don't see it that way.
They're always looking at where they fall short of their
idea.
They're
always looking at where they're falling short. And so what happens is more of the falling short. It's like a chain reaction. Wherever you begin is where you're going to end up with. You can compare it to a very common, example. Everybody, I think, almost everybody out there knows what it takes to lose weight. Consume less calories than you burn, etc. And there are many people out there who are doing that. They're consuming less calories than they're burning. But the moment they stop thinking of doing it, or they don't want to do it, or doing it isn't fun anymore, they're going to stop, because it's all focused on, let me do this. They never saw themselves any differently. They saw themselves as being fat, so they had to do something to get skinny. They never saw themselves as being healthy. or being beautiful or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
The people who actually make it and can keep weight off are the ones who've shifted how they see themselves. They've seen themselves as being healthy. They've seen themselves as being a person committed to health. They've seen themselves as being beautiful or attractive or something like that. And so then the taking actions that, like eating less or whatever, was just a natural response. But when you're doing something because something's wrong with you, it creates resistance, struggle, overwhelm. It takes a long time, start, stop, all of the scarcity patterns we've talked about. And no matter what you do, no matter how much you do, it's never enough, because at the beginning, that was where you started.
That makes perfect sense. Teresa, you mentioned a moment ago about time management, and I think most people, when they think about abundance and scarcity, they think primarily about finances. But as you point out in the program, one of the biggest areas of scarcity in today's world is time.
Mm-hmm.
Could you just address that? Because I'd like people, as they're listening to this tape, to be applying the abundance principles not just to the finances, but to the other areas, and especially to time, which is where I feel the greatest pressure.
Yeah, this is a rich one. We could have a whole call on this one here, Andrew. Let me begin the conversation by showing the connection, because they're connected. The scarcity patterns we have around time are connected to the ones we have around money, are the ones we have in all areas of our life. And for me, the connection begins with the definition of money, or the definition of time, for that matter, in some respects, because they're both man-made devices or units of measure. You have a dollar bill, you have a minute, okay? They're man-made units of measure. In a book, Your Money or Your Life, what first began to shift my relationship and understanding of money, they have a definition that says money is something for which you choose to exchange your time and your life energy. So if you're an entrepreneur, you're putting in lots of time probably and lots of energy trying to get your business to go so that you can have money. If you've gotten to the point that you're having money, you still probably are putting in, a fair amount of time and energy. And if at any point in time, until you've gotten a true residual income, you stop putting in your time or energy, the money's not going to keep coming. So people can see that connection. So at one level, I always say money is one representation of our energy. What's going on with our energy is going to influence what's going on with our money. If our energy's in scarcity, money's going to happen, abundance, etc. The interesting thing is the same thing is true when it comes to time. Our time, in many respects, is just one representation of our energy. And I may be a little radical here, but for all of the people that I work with who say, I don't have enough time, there's not enough time, I say that that's not really true. What they perceive, there's that perception of a limitation or a not enoughness when it comes to time, is it's a reaction they have that creates a certain behavior of pushing and working harder and needing to do more. But what's really going on is that they don't have enough energy. And I don't mean physical energy. It just means that their energy or their thoughts, which is one form of energy, is being eaten up by ways that don't serve them. Their time is being eaten up by their scarcity patterns and their drains. For example, I work with a lot of entrepreneurs, people who work out of home, and not enough time comes up a lot for them. And whenever somebody that I've worked with as a coaching client or whatever consistently keeps coming back to, I don't have enough time, I don't have enough time, I don't have enough time, then I say, okay, how are you spending your energy? Okay? I just take time out of it.
Right.
And they may be spending their energy worried about not having enough time. Have you ever noticed that when you have the thought, Andrew, you don't have enough time, there's a certain response in your body, you start going hyper, you start, okay, I got to get going, and you really get moving type of thing?
Absolutely, yeah.
It's almost like hyper mode sometimes. But that hyper mode takes a lot of energy, okay?
It's exhausting.
It's exhausting. And it's like if you're going through life in using more energy than is required by the tasks at hand, because we've got all these fears and, we're already worried about the next thing and da-da-da-da-da, it's not often that you don't have enough time. It's just that the time you're using is being eaten up. The energy that you have is being diluted and distracted by all of this other stuff, and you can't be present to what's going on and get it completed. That's one part of it. It's kind of like black flies out in the wilderness. Have you ever been out in the wilderness and experienced the lovely creation
yes.
called black flies?
Oh, yes.
Okay, so they're buzzing around your head. These swarms of black flies, they could literally drive you crazy. And my husband and I, whenever we're out in the wilderness, and I remember my first time out there, my first experience with black flies, I think it's like a bonding experience. But whenever you're out there now, you can tell somebody who's out there for the first time in the wilderness because the black flies are buzzing around their head. And this person, you can tell they're a new person out there, they're swatting at them and they're swearing at them and they're trying to avoid them and they're just having a miserable time. They're just, it's like they're screaming and it's like this isn't any fun and why am I out here in the wilderness and all of that sort of stuff. And they're using up all this energy for the black flies trying to get rid of them. Have you ever had any luck getting rid of black flies, Andrew?
Not going to happen.
Not going to happen. But notice all the energy they're spending on that task. I mean, just tons of it. And it's actually making, they can be with their best friends in this gorgeous country and they're miserable because their energy is being eaten away or taken away by these black flies. If you watch that person a few days later, they'll be walking in the wilderness and the black flies will still be buzzing and they'll be laughing and having a good time and hiking and covering ground and looking at the beauty of nature. It's like they stopped giving the energy to the black flies. And that allowed them to move ahead and, cover territory, etc. So it's like that's kind of like when we say we don't have enough time, there's a lot of scarcity patterns going on that's probably eating up the ways we can use time. So we're not using our time abundantly. And when anybody tells me they don't have enough time consistently, I always give them this challenge. It goes back to that idea of expanding your bucket, okay? Because, see, the not enough time means that you've pushed the limits of your bucket. What people are basically saying is, I can't get any more in. I'm doing as much as I can. Not enough time is usually a do, you're in do mode on that one.
Right,
I can't get any more in. I'm trying to put more in and I don't have enough time. To me, that's a sign they probably haven't expanded their bucket. That's why they can't get any more in. So they're trying to do the same things with the old tools they've had. And so I challenge anyone who doesn't have enough time to look and see what requests they're not making in life. Because asking is one of the most powerful tools of abundance, asking and receiving. There's even a saying out there that says, ask and you shall receive. I look at that, and that's a formula of abundance. Yet in our society, we're so wired for doing, and we have to do it ourselves, and if we need to rely on others, we're weak, all that sort of stuff. So a lot of the reason why people don't have enough time is they're trying to do it all themselves. On your daily list, the to-do list, how often does it say at the top, things I need to do today? Isn't that how it oftentimes starts out?
Absolutely.
Okay, so notice who needs to do those things.
Right, there's no who can I delegate this to today.
Yeah, it's not what needs to be done today. It's like things I need to do. That's the mode of thinking. And as long as you stay in that mode, eventually you're going to max out that bucket. But when you start to say ask and receive, it's like suddenly things can get done, more time can be available, but you didn't need more hours in the day. You didn't need a new time management system. Now, that brings up a lot of stuff for people because you're not supposed to receive and you're not supposed to need, and there's some of those scarcity patterns and beliefs that we need to start to relieve.
Well, then you go into a lot more depth in this in the tapes and the workbook, and I just I enjoyed it so much because so often when we ask, and I've been watching myself now how I ask for things, we don't ask directly.
No.
We just allude to it. And the other day, I was talking to a friend of mine, and there's a workshop coming up that I was wanting to assist in, and unfortunately I have a commitment on the Sunday, so I couldn't be there for the whole weekend. And normally when you're assisting a program, that means that you're out.
Right.
And so I said to her, well, it sure would be nice if I could just come on Friday night and Saturday. And hinting around.
Yes.
And she didn't say anything.
No.
And fortunately, after preparing myself for the interview, even today, I caught myself in that. I went, you know what? I didn't actually ask her.
That's right.
And I phoned and I said, how would it be for you? Would it work for your agenda if I was to be there just for Saturday night and Sunday, or Friday night and Saturday? And she said, sure.
Yeah.
And so I see over and over again. There's so many examples in the workbook and in the tapes you have that how we don't ask for things, then we don't get them.
Right. And then we think something's wrong with us. We're not good enough. Abundance doesn't work. All those things come up that just keep us right in the scarcity pattern. And that's rarely true.
Part of it's about asking, and another part of it is about receiving.
Yes.
But asking clearly, I know that you've got the all-important 7 C's in the book, and we don't have time to share all of that with the short time we've got. But one in particular is clarity. And could you talk to us about how important clarity is when it comes to abundance and how they're connected?
Sure. And that I can do in a very quick sentence. Cardinal rule of abundance. If you do not have clarity, you will have scarcity. Period. If there's something you don't have clarity about, if you don't know how much money you have in your checkbook, you don't know how much the bill is that you're going to owe, you will have scarcity in some way, shape, or form. Very practically, it could be because you're going to bounce a check or not be able to pay a bill, or in those black flies, those energy drains, like you're worried, you're afraid, you don't want to know, procrastination, that will be scarcity. If you don't have clarity about what needs to be done, how much time it's going to require, how much time you have, any of those things, any place where you don't have clarity, a scarcity pattern or reaction will show up. There'll be a knot in your energy. Your energy won't flow. There'll be a distraction or a drain on it. And that one that's the truth. If you don't have clarity on how much money's coming in and out of your life, you'll have scarcity in that. Chances are you'll go backwards in debt. And I've had that one. I even know this one. And there have been, in my past 5 years, there have been just a couple of busy months in my life where I've kind of not been as clear around my money as I normally am. And it's amazing how in a very short time, when I wasn't clear of it, it's like we didn't make as much money, we started to go backwards into debt, something like that. It was just instant, the moment. And on top of that, I was worried, I was afraid, then I'd have to push and thought I needed to do more, all of that. So it just shows up. If you don't. Now, people say, yeah, but how do I get clarity? And sometimes the first step in that is to simply start to get clear about what you're not clear about. Just start to say, wow, I don't know how much this is going to cost. And I've got a funny story on this one, and I think I can tell it in the time we have. From the time I've known the man who's now my husband, from the time I met him, he'd always had this dream of taking his father, who's getting older now and elderly, on a big fishing trip. And after we got married and we moved to Minnesota and, we bought the house, and then the network marketing business wasn't quite building as fast as we wanted, and we were going backwards, we kept doing the old, we need to make money first, do have B, then we'll have some saved, and then we can go off on this trip. So we kept putting it off. What we wanted to do was take his dad out on a Great Lakes charter fishing trip, all expenses paid, go out for a couple of days, have them charter, and take care of him, and put him up in, lodging or cabins and stuff like that. That was the dream. And in our minds, we figured that was going to be pretty expensive. So we knew we didn't have enough money, so we just kept putting it off until about 3 years ago when we were visiting at Christmas, and I got that Dan's father's health was suffering some, and I thought, you know what, if we're going to do it, we better just do it. So for the first time we were committed. This year we're taking him on the fishing trip no matter what. And so for the very first time, Andrew, we actually started to look to see, where could we go, what our charter boats cost, what would it cost, okay? We had imagined this was going to be, couple $1,000 or something like that. And when we finally called, we found this place where we'd go out for the whole day. They'd clean the fish for us. They'd bait the hook. They'd set the hook. It would be just everything we'd want. When we got back, they'd cook the fish for us. There's this gourmet restaurant. We could have lodgings for the weekend, all that sort of stuff. And the whole thing, Andrew, was going to cost $300.
No way.
Yes. And we had been procrastinating on this dream for 5 years straight simply because we had never stopped to even get clear how much it would have cost. We just assumed. And so we had the scarcity of not doing it for 5 years. Now we've done it for 3 years since, needless to say. But that was, for me, a huge example of when you don't have clarity. Now, why didn't I have clarity? Because I thought I already knew what it was going to be. I didn't want to, disappoint my husband. I didn't want to be overwhelmed. I didn't want to know. But if I had gotten the clarity, we would have gone on that fishing trip 5 years previously.
And again, you're talking about financial clarity here, but abundance applies in all areas, so the same is true. If I'm having trouble with my time, that I need to become aware of how long things are going to take, and where I'm spending my time / energy now, and
right.
so on.
And how long they are taking, and the black flies that are buzzing your energy. One of the things that happens, and I'm going to see if I can address this quickly, when you mentioned the 7 C's that I talk about in my book. Another one of those C's is 2 more of those C's are completion and celebration. You need to complete your tasks, and then I always say you need to celebrate when you're done, which is, when I work with people, that's the hardest C of them all. Clarity is even easier than celebration, which seems interesting. But you see, one of the things that continues to drain our time and keep scarcity and and all sorts of abundance away is when we're in that do mode, we got to get going. We get this done and we get this done. We start checking off our to-do list, and when all 25 is done, then we could celebrate. And what I tell people to do is celebrate after every action is completed. Because if you go back to time is about energy, money is about energy, what happens for most people, this is the scarcity pattern. They get up and they say, okay, I've got these 25 things to do. So they put energy out and they take the action to get this thing done. Okay, so they've just put out some energy. And as soon as that's done, they cross it off and they're on to the next one. And so they just put out some more energy. Cross that off, now they're on to the next one. They just put out some more energy to complete that. And they keep going on that throughout the day. Now notice how much energy is going out, Andrew, and not very much coming in, is there?
Mm-hmm.
So as we go through the day, no matter how hard we're working, there's less energy that we have to bring to the situation. It's kind of like, way back in the days of, computers, before PCs, etc., there was the phenomenon that the more a computer's memory got filled, the slower it was at processing. And so when computers started to slow down, they knew that they needed to clear out some old memory so it would, its processing would speed back up again. And so they'd go clean off the memory board, delete files off the memory board. Well, it's kind of like us, if we have drained ourselves kind of in reverse, it's like we can't process as quickly because there's less energy. It's like we're running on vapors or we're running on empty. And so the time it takes for anything is going to be, it's going to take longer because we're not clear, we're not energized. So what I tell people is you complete something and you celebrate it. You can do a simple like, yes, I did it, or play some music and dance, or go out and pour yourself a cup of tea, but something to acknowledge that completion, because when you've completed something, you have that sense of accomplishment and that sense of contentment and abundance, truly. The celebration is what puts energy back in, like you replenish the energy you've just put out.
Right, so it recharges your battery for the next
so then you're going on to the next one, which means if you're doing that throughout the day on a fully charged battery, you can get a lot more done in the same amount of time than when you're pushing yourself from scarcity, from drain, from exhaustion. But the ironic thing is when we're in the place called I don't have enough time, that scarcity pattern, the last thing you think you can afford to do is, take a break to go celebrate.
Mm-hmm.
And so you've just given into the scarcity because you think there's the perception of scarcity. You keep taking actions from scarcity. You never get yourself back into being abundant. The celebration, that taking that break gets you back in a place of being abundant, which then when you take the same actions is going to create a different result.
Great idea. Fantastic. Well, I have one more question I want to ask before we go to the wrap-up.
Okay.
If you wouldn't mind, you have made the transition from having a job or career to working on your own, and many of our members are either in the middle of that transition or contemplating making it and haven't made it yet. Part of that, of course, is around a fear of scarcity.
Mm-hmm.
Could you just either give us some examples or talk about some ways that can support our members to proceed more confidently in the direction of their dreams, because I know you have done that.
Focus at least as much time on the internal stuff as you do on the external stuff. One of my biggest mistakes I made at first in the transition was I was focusing on the doing, the actions, the training, the working on my business, all of that sort of stuff. And
right.
So I didn't have time for, the celebrations, for the having fun, for the expansion, for the looking at my thoughts. Every network marketer out there probably has been taught, you need to write down your vision, or you need to create a vision board, or you need to spend, 30 seconds a day, looking at your vision. And you know what? When I was first starting out, I didn't have time for that because I was busy acting on my vision. I got to get going on this type of thing. And that was one of my biggest mistakes because it kept me in that do mode. The other thing that I would have people get is to look and see, again, back to kind of related to that do, have, be, what's their motivation for the transition. If you're transitioning into something else because you don't want your current job, or you don't like your current job, or
you're
you want
moving away from.
If you're getting away from something, that's just you're going to bring your same scarcity patterns and paradigms into your new thing. It's like you need to be able to see the abundance where you're at right now, instead of, like, okay, my abundance will be when I'm doing this. You need to find and see the abundance right now where you're at, so that abundance will continue to follow you into the next place. And that's the biggest challenge for people. It's like what motivates us to move on is like, well, this isn't good working, or this is wrong, or this isn't enough, and I want to try something else. Grass is greener type of thing.
Right.
Instead of finding the abundance that's right here with you now, so that can carry with you. Those would be two things. And then the third thing is be open to continuing to learn, the what you don't know. Because what happened for me, and I see it with the entrepreneurs that I work with a lot, especially network marketers, is they've jumped into network marketing because they want to have more time with their family. They want to have more freedom. They don't want to work so hard, all that sort of stuff. And so they see this as an opportunity for the abundance. Yet what happens is, whether they're doing it part-time or full-time, they're bringing the exact same mode of operation, scarcity patterns as I call them, into network marketing. And so I see people in network marketing who are working 60, 70, 80-hour weeks just like they were in the corporate world. I see in their entrepreneurial business, well, I don't have time to have fun, which is the reason why they left the corporate world. It's like because they never shifted how they're being in relationship to actions and results. They changed environment, but the results are the same. It's not all that different from, people who, win the lottery, and suddenly they have all this money, but, statistics show that 85% of them will be right back, bankrupt or pretty close to it 3 to 5 years later.
Unless they make the internal shift.
Because they didn't change internally. And when you're making this transition, make sure that you're transitioning internally, not just externally, or you'll just recreate the exact same thing all over again. I've had people work with me who, have come to work with me on the verge of their third bankruptcy, wondering, this time it's got to be different. Because they cleared away the symptom, the thing that they didn't like when they filed bankruptcy, like the debt was gone, and for a while they did good, but because they never did the internal shift, they eventually got back there again.
Well, and I guess that's why, I'm so appreciative of work like Harv's, who works on the inner game, and all of the exercises in your book, because they're very much focused on making that shift.
Yes.
Speaking of which, if you would mind just taking a minute to tell our members about your products and how people can get in touch with you, or your website and so on, so that they can look into your work further if that interests them.
Sure. A couple of different ways. One, you can check out our website. It's a new website that we're still growing and expanding, but there's a lot there already, and you can find that at www.accessabundance.com, and that's ACCESS, abundance. We also have a toll-free number you can call and leave a message, and some of us on our team will get back to you to answer any questions you have.
Okay.
And that number is 1-888-838-1929. And we have lots of programs, tapes, books, etc. The one that you've been talking about, Andrew, the Access Your Abundance Collection, is probably our Cadillac right now.
Surely the greatest starting point for somebody.
Yeah, I mean, it's got so much that, if you just began to work with one or two of the principles in that book, huge things would start to change.
So how much is that program, and if somebody wants it, how can they get it?
Well, I've got a special offer here for the Success Tracks people. It's normally $69, and right now we're already running a promo with them. That's $69 US for those of you in Canada. We've got a promo right now that we're running that if you order that, in addition to that, you'll get a little booklet I created called 30 Ways to Have More and Spend Less. You'll also get a gift certificate good towards $50 towards one of our other workshops. And for Success Track members also, if you order that product and you identify yourself as being from Success Tracks or Peak Potential, in addition to those free gifts, we'll also waive the additional shipping charge for Canadian residents, so you don't have to worry about the additional shipping that we normally charge to Canada. And we'll also include a great hour-long cassette tape that I created a couple years ago called What If Money Really Does Grow on Trees? So you'll get the Access Your Abundance collection for $69 plus the U.S. shipping and handling. And then you'll get the booklet, 30 Ways to Have More, Spend Less, the tape, What If Money Really Does Grow on Trees, a gift certificate for the future. So it's a powerful package for you. You can really access your abundance that way.
That's great. Very generous of you. And for people that want to find out about the other courses and the coaching and so on, I'm sure they can find that on your website.
Yep. As
well as all that information is in the Access Your Abundance program. So, well, this has just been fantastic. An hour just seems so short, Teresa.
Thanks.
And
they always do fly by.
They do. So on behalf of Peak Potentials and all of our Success Track members, I'd like to thank you just so much for taking your time to be with us today.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for the opportunity.
Well, I know it's an abundant universe, and I still find myself in scarcity at times, so I'm very appreciative of your work, and I'm sure that many of our listeners will benefit greatly from the ideas and suggestions and the insights you've shared with us.
Thanks, Andrew.
So thank you very much.
All right.
This is Andrew Barber-Starkey saying goodbye for now. I wish you good luck putting what you've learned from this tape into practice, and I really look forward to bringing you another Mastermind presentation next month.